celebrations in Azerbaijan, anger in Armenia. Both sides have agreed to a Russian deal to end the fighting in the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region. But can the deal bring peace after decades of animosity and mistrust? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. One of the world's longest-running conflicts appears to be over, at least for now. Armenia and Azerbaijan have agreed to a Russian-mediated ceasefire in Nagorno-Karabakh. The disputed region is recognized as part of Azerbaijan, but is controlled by Armenians. While the Azeris call the deal a victory, Armenians have called it a national humiliation. Protesters want the Armenian Prime Minister to resign for giving up territory to Azerbaijan. But Nikol Pashinyan said he had no choice after 1,200 Armenian soldiers were killed in just 6 weeks of fighting. He has not appeared in public since signing the agreement. We'll get reaction from both sides, but first, Huda Abdelhamid reports from the Armenian capital, Yerevan.
Well, the main slogan coming out of here is that Nikol Pashinyan, who's the Prime Minister of Armenia, is a traitor. Now you have a couple of thousand people here in Freedom Square. These are people who are infuriated with this ceasefire agreement. By and large, it has been quite peaceful. There have been some scuffles here and there. We are told that at least 20 people had been detained at the beginning of this rally, and also one of Armenia's largest opposition parties saying that their leader is at the moment being questioned at the national security. Now you have police on this side. At the moment they're standing there watching. They've been reminding people through a microphone that there is still a martial law in this country and you're not allowed to protest, but these people are ignoring it. Now I've spoken to a few of them. They say that Nikol Pashinyan didn't have the right to sign that agreement without consulting with the people. They said that that is not democracy, and that basically he sold out and gave away their land. That's what, including those 7 regions that are considered being occupied by Armenia since 1994. Well, people here say that is not the case. They say that the people that lived in Stepanakert and other parts of Nagorno-Karabakh won't be returning there because of what Nikol Pashinyan accepted.
While there's anger in Armenia, the mood in Azerbaijan is much more jubilant, as Osama bin Javed reports from the capital, Baku.
A victory dance which has been years in the making. Azerbaijanis are jubilant after the announcement of a deal to end the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh. Even physical constraints didn't stop some people from showing their joy. Hundreds of thousands of displaced people have wanted to return. Now that seems possible.
I will return to the place where my mother and grandmother were born, where my ancestors are from. And yes, that's it. It means a lot to me. I cannot even describe this feeling. It's impossible to express all these feelings.
After steady gains on the battlefield since September, the deal has been made possible largely because of Azerbaijan's advanced military power. The president acknowledged his forces as he declared the conflict over.
God bless all our heroes. As a result of their heroism and self-sacrifice, we return to our lands. May God heal all our wounded soldiers, let them recover soon, and return to normal life.
Aliyev called it an Armenian defeat, agreed with Russian mediation. Under the deal, Azerbaijan will hold on to the areas of Nagorno-Karabakh that it took during the recent fighting, while Armenia has agreed to withdraw from several other nearby areas in the coming few weeks. Russian peacekeepers will remain in the region for an extendable 5 years. In return, Azerbaijan will stop its advances, and the guns on the front lines have fallen silent. Many people in the Azeri capital Baku don't completely trust Russian peacekeepers and wanted their forces to retake all of the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region. The Turkish foreign minister called the deal a sacred success, as the Azeri president hinted at Turkish peacekeepers in addition to the Russians. But it's not yet decided exactly how those troops will be deployed.
Azerbaijanis say a few weeks of war have achieved more than 2 decades of diplomacy. But maintaining peace is not going to be easy, as thousands of people have been killed on both sides and more than 1 million have been displaced in both Armenia and Azerbaijan. Osama bin Javed, Al Jazeera, Baku.
All right, let's bring in our guests in Baku, Nigar Arpadarai. She's a member of parliament in Azerbaijan. In Istanbul, Matthew Bryza, a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center and Global Energy Center, and previously served as U.S. ambassador to Azerbaijan. And in London, we have Lawrence Brewers, associate fellow at the Russia and Eurasia program at Chatham House. I just want to let our viewers know we made repeated attempts to have a representative from the Armenian government join our panel, but they have declined. Welcome to all of you. Matthew, let me start with you. This agreement is not going to end decades of mistrust and tension. How do you begin to resolve that? And do you believe that this deal is going to hold?
Yeah, and thanks, Mohammed, for having me. And, I served for 3 years as the U.S. mediator of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. And what was agreed in the ceasefire agreement is the same thing. It's the same set of basic principles that we had put on the negotiating table in 2007, and which Armenia and Azerbaijan actually agreed to in principle in 2009. So this is a sound framework, again, that Armenia previously accepted, but Nikol Pashinyan abandoned during the course of the past year. So I think there's a very strong chance it will hold, not only because the principles make sense, but also because Armenia's military doesn't have the ability to resist anymore. And I think Russia is very much committed to the agreement holding, even though having its peacekeepers on the ground also provided the opportunity to have outsized influence.
Nigar, with this agreement, do you feel that Azerbaijan's objectives in Nagorno-Karabakh have largely been achieved? I mean, do you see this as a victory?
Well, thank you for the question. To start with, let's admit that international community failed its mission to resolve Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. 26 years of on and off negotiations cannot be qualified in a different way. UN Security Council resolutions were not implemented, and no visible efforts were carried out by international community in order to enforce them. Against this background, Azerbaijan's enforcement of its legal rights over its occupied territories is absolutely justified. It is within international law, and if there's someone to blame for the start of hostilities, it is Armenia and, I would say, international organizations, because international organizations didn't do their job and Armenia did everything to keep the occupation. And when the military hostilities started, international community, even now, they didn't do anything. The whole rhetoric was around stopping military operation. It was not about ending illegal occupation. They should have called Armenia to withdraw its troops from Azerbaijani lands. But now what we see now is that the peace deal, ending military hostilities in the occupied territories, is the demonstration of Azerbaijan's will to reach sustainable peace and to restore Azerbaijan's internationally recognized territories, territorial integrity. This is what we wanted from the very beginning, and we wanted our refugees and IDPs to go back to their homes. Well, Azerbaijan have always wanted peace, and as my colleague Matthew Bryza said, it was actually agreed, but then Armenian side rejected, and Armenia did everything just to stop, to keep status quo and to turn it into a frozen conflict, which was unacceptable for Azerbaijan. Now, I have a big question whether Armenia is capable of sticking to the agreement achieved, because Azerbaijan will do it. Azerbaijan is always doing everything within the framework of international law, and we always keep our fulfill our commitment. But I have a big question whether Armenia is capable at all, because Armenia is turning into a rogue state. You see what is happening there now. I have serious doubts about that, because even their president has came up saying that he didn't know anything about this peace agreement, about this statement made. And you see the rallies, and Pashinyan is losing control. So again, if you ask me, I don't know. I have a big doubt that Armenia will fulfill it.
Lawrence, there is a lot of anger in Armenia about this agreement. What are the implications now for Prime Minister Pashinyan? Is this considered a defeat?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt about it. It is very clearly a defeat. I would question labeling the document that was signed by Russia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan as a peace agreement. It's actually 9 bullet points. It represents a partial enactment, as Matthew was saying, of the basic principles, the peace proposal that's been on the table since 2007 in different shapes and forms. But from an Armenian perspective, the key issue is the status of Nagorno-Karabakh. This, from an Armenian perspective, is the cause of the conflict, the fundamental issue that divides Armenians and Azerbaijanis. And this agreement doesn't say anything about that. President Ilham Aliyev has said that there will be no discussions of status for as long as he is president. And so, that crucial issue, I think, remains unresolved. We don't know what the governance structure will be within the truncated Nagorno-Karabakh that's going to now be patrolled by Russian peacekeepers. And so in that sense, that's just one of the key issues, perhaps the core issue that Armenians are looking at and seeing absolutely, not satisfied by this agreement. And with regard to Nikol Pashinyan's continued premiership, I would agree that some reckless speeches and policies over the last couple of years have aggravated the situation, and I think there will be a reckoning for Nikol Pashinyan. But I think the real reckoning is with the policy in Armenia over the preceding 20 years, from 1998 to 2018, when Armenia essentially held on to its war gains and didn't take the opportunity to negotiate from a position of strength. And so I think there's a real opportunity now in Armenia to reconsider that strategy and to think through a vision for the future of the country in the light of these new realities.
Matthew, it looked to me like you were nodding to some of what Lawrence was saying, so it seems you want to jump in. I will let you, but I also want to ask you about this. Russia has basically committed now to a peacekeeping operation that does not include any kind of a political process. So does that pose any problems for this agreement going forward?
Oh, yeah, it poses a problem for sort of stability in this part of Azerbaijan. Russian peacekeepers have a terrible record of being up to nefarious things in separatist conflicts in both Georgia and Moldova. I recall when I was the point person for U.S. relations with this part of the world in Washington during the August War, the Russians had positioned their peacekeeping forces in front of the South Ossetian separatists, who then opened fire on the Georgian army. And the Georgians were afraid to fire back because it would have meant killing a bunch of Russian peacekeepers. So, we just had this agreement put in place. I hope it doesn't come to that. But having those Russian peacekeepers on the ground is not a net positive, except that peacekeepers are immediately essential, right, to keep the Azerbaijani and Armenian forces separate, and then later will be needed, and we're always part of the basic principles, to make sure that a key element of the principles, that there's a road connection between Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, can function safely. So I didn't see the international community being ready anytime soon to provide those peacekeepers that are so needed, because all this happened so unbelievably quickly. Going back to what Lawrence was saying, to me, this is the biggest strategic defeat for Armenia since the Bolsheviks took over, maybe even before that. And it really is, I think, the greatest diplomatic victory in Azerbaijan's independent history. There are all those people that the report was talking about pushing for, and still are pushing for, Azerbaijan to keep going, push further. But President Aliyev chose the path of strategic restraint here. And we should keep in mind that since 2007, as Lauren said, when actually we, because I was one of the co-chairs, first tabled those basic principles, Armenia was in favor in principle, and then Azerbaijan accepted them as well. It's false and wrong to say that Armenia somehow had the deal, a worse deal now than it could have gotten before the war even began. Without any fighting, if they would have just stayed at the negotiating table in good faith and not done the provocative things to which Lawrence was alluding to, they could have gotten to the same point that they accepted 11 years ago. Last point is that I think President Aliyev understood that hubris needs to be kept in check. Yes, the people are enthused about these unexpected military victories, but war is the continuation of politics by other means. Every war that's ever been ended has been ended not on the battlefield, but at the negotiating table when the victor obtains the political objectives for which the victor began fighting the war. And that has just happened.
Nigar, I want to talk for a moment about these. I'll let you jump in just a second, but I also do want to ask you before you start, is it clear exactly where these Russian peacekeepers will be deployed to? And do you believe that Russia's presence in the form of peacekeepers is going to pose any problems for authorities in Azerbaijan down the line?
Well, thank you again. Just a couple of additions I would like to mention regarding the status of Qarabağ. Well, for us, the status of Qarabağ is clear. Qarabağ is the part of Azerbaijan, as per in Azerbaijani constitution, as per international law, as per UN, as per OSCE, Council of Europe, and all other international organizations. The discussion of the status should stop and should turn into a discussion on how to achieve safety and prosperity, as well as human rights for people who live there. Now, regarding implications for Prime Minister Pashinyan, I think that Pashinyan was not capable of deciding and implementing in a consistent manner. His statements during the day vary, and he lied a lot in media. For example, the whole story about thousands of mercenaries fighting for Azerbaijan was nothing but a fake story. This was simply ridiculous, and it was a kind of cheap sentiment to bring some medieval crusading sentiments in the West. So, and as a result, he achieved basically nothing. He achieved some marginalized far-right Nazi sympathizers who expressed their support or came to Qarabağ to visit him. It was not wise at all, I would say. Regarding Russian peacekeepers and the deal itself, well, in an ideal world, there should be no need for peacekeepers because it's a territory of Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan is strong and sustainable state and is capable of providing its people with safety and prosperity, regardless of their ethnically and political views. However, the peacekeeper element of the statement is again a clear sign that Azerbaijani government does not aim at harming any civilian on its territory. The future, as we see it, this region is a return of Azerbaijani refugees to Qarabağ and living together with Armenians. And may I remind you of numerous statements of Armenian officials, including presidents of Armenia, who directly or indirectly claimed that Armenians and Azerbaijanis are incomparable. So basically, these are the words, and their actions said that. We always were saying that Azerbaijan will give all the guarantees to the Armenians living in Nagorno-Karabakh, but it is a territory of Azerbaijan. So basically, now for us, the main thing is to rebuild those lands because they are completely destroyed by Armenian occupation. They turned into ghost cities, and we have direct evidence of them being destroyed. There's nothing there except military outposts and trenches. So basically, this is the thing. And also, one comment that I would like to make, that it's really a big shame that Armenia is, in a decade, has turned to a mono-ethnic country, mono-ethnic state. So 99% of people living in Armenia, they are Armenian, of Armenian origin. And I would claim that Armenia's current demography is a very basically shameful achievement. So so basically that's it.
Lawrence, will ethnic Armenians trust the Azeris?
Well, that's a very difficult question in one sense, and it's a very straightforward question in another. The answer is no. I know that the rhetoric in Azerbaijan is about offering a high level of autonomy, that the rights that the rights of the Karabakh Armenians will be guaranteed. But you know, we have seen a very difficult history with that, and you know, I think we need to recognise that despite these offers, over the last 24 years, there never has been a concrete paper, a document that would make clear what kind of commitments Azerbaijan is willing to make. I remember a colleague from Azerbaijani civil society had an idea to draft a constitution for a Nagorno-Karabakh Republic as part of Azerbaijan. Unfortunately, that colleague is living in exile outside of Azerbaijan today. And I think, what would really be very worrying is if we see the renaming of Armenian settlements, the reattribution of Armenian cultural heritage. For example, if it would be framed now as being Caucasian Albanian rather than Armenian, that would send signals to Armenians that their culture, that their heritage is not safe in Azerbaijan. And I think we need to recognize that. We need to recognize those fears. And beyond that, the document that was signed this week seeks to resolve this conflict, seeks to impose a peace, essentially, in terms of security arrangements and infrastructure. There was a question earlier in the session about politics. We need to have a wholly different approach now to the core issues around reconciliation. Communities that are saturated with the worst possible stereotypes about one another are now about to come into much closer contact than they have at any point in the last 26 years. So, we need a multifaceted political process, one that is close to the ground, that is conveying the concerns and grievances of communities. And we also need an investigation process that will investigate and document alleged war crimes from this 6-week war in order to break the cycle of impunity. The wars in the 1990s basically, enacted very grave human rights violations, very significant degree of ethnic cleansing on both sides. And there was never an investigation or a process to address that. And my concern now is that if such a process doesn't happen, you simply build a new reservoir of grievances that will eventually emerge in a new round of conflict 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now. So I think, the peacekeeping arrangements are crucial in order to provide for security for the Karabakh Armenian population right now. But we need much more intensive political processes aimed at rehabilitating these broken relationships between Armenians and Azerbaijanis, Karabakh Azerbaijanis displaced from Nagorno-Karabakh and beyond.
Matthew, two-pronged question. Do you believe that this agreement means that Moscow and Ankara are, geopolitically speaking, the new kingmakers when it comes to the South Caucasus? And also, with President-elect Biden, is the U.S., do you believe, going to get any more involved when it comes to the region and when it comes to this peace deal and the conflict beforehand?
Yeah. Well, let me start a second. I hope President-elect Biden will get more involved. I mean, the Trump administration and the Obama administration, though, really did not pay sufficient attention to the South Caucasus. And then we see, what a potential powder keg it can be with, as you said, Turkey and Russia. Yes, the new kingmakers. So I think the Biden administration will. Well, I know they think, and that Joe Biden himself thinks in a systematic and strategic way. He understands Russia's ambitions in this region, in the Black Sea region. And so I think, and knowing the people that he's going to hire could be two of my former bosses, our top candidates for Secretary of State, they understand. And I think they will have an inclination to be involved. And I hope they will, because to build the trust and to rebuild the economies, the infrastructure, the social interwovenness, there's going to have to be a huge amount of external assistance from the U.S., from EU member states, from international financial institutions. But yes, Turkey and Russia, I think, are de facto filling a diplomatic vacuum. And I really saw that vacuum coming into fore this past July, when there were some major clashes, not around Nagorno-Karabakh, but along the Turkey-Azerbaijan border. And in the immediate aftermath, Russia called snap military exercises in Armenia with Russian and Armenian troops, and Turkey reciprocated in Azerbaijan. And as a guy who's Mr. NATO at heart, I think it's great that Turkey is there providing a diplomatic counterbalance. If you think like Joe Biden does in terms of NATO being at the center of U.S. national security, it can't be a negative thing a priori that NATO's second largest military is bringing its clout to not only to support Azerbaijan in the conflict, but to encourage Azerbaijanis to accept this agreement. If you listen to what Turkish Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu has been saying, he's been saying that, this is a good agreement. And by the way, that President Aliyev also, he stuck with the deal that he advocated back in 2009, didn't deviate from it, and brought things to closure here.
All right, we've run out of time, so we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Thanks so much to all our guests, Nigar Arpadarai, Matthew Bryza, and Lawrence Brewers. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Mohammed Jamjoom, and the whole team here in Doha, bye for now.